My name's Brendan Ma. So I'll be running with the Vision for SRC team, and we're running on white.
And are you a member of any political party, or have you ever worked for a political party or union?
Personally, I'm a member of the Liberal Party. The team we're running on is an independent party. It's 75% independence, completely independent.
And are you a member of any political clubs on campus?
I am. I'm a member of the Liberal Club on campus. Just a personal endeavour.
And have you ever held a role in the Liberal Party itself?
No.
Are you involved in the Conservative Club?
No, I have no role with the Conservative Club.
Amazing.
I think I like their page.
Cool.
So why do you want to run the SRC, given that it struggles to reach quorum regularly, and how would you rectify this?
Absolutely. I think the well-publicised issues about quorum this year are, in fact, one of the big reasons why I want to run for SRC. I'm running for SRC president because I finally want an SRC that serves all its students. Because I think if you walk down somewhere like Eastern Avenue or Science Road, or maybe walk into ABS, you'll see people, and if you ask them what they think about the SRC, the response you get is something that I wouldn't be too surprised about. Because for all those students who have never seen the SRC, never been heard by the SRC, never had a reason to care about them, that's the biggest challenge for the SRC. In order to promote their welfare, to support them, to protect those that really need the support of the SRC, we have to be engaging with all of its members, all of the people that pay over $1,000 over their student life into this multi-million-dollar organization. So that's what I want to achieve. An SRC that promotes service, that's not afraid to be accountable, and an SRC that's representative of everyone.
So to the second part of that question, do you have any plans to fix the problems of the SRC and failing to reach quorum so regularly?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of quorum, I think as a president, what people can expect is a president that really commits towards KPIs for all of its councillors and taking a really strong stance on making sure that we reach quorum and that we have regular meetings. I think what's important for a lot of people to realize about this current SRC, and I acknowledge the work of the SRC president is a huge amount of work. It's a tough job, and I don't fault the current president in her execution of her duties. But I'd say that for an SRC to function, we need to have much more than just having 6 or 7 out of our 12 meetings this year. We need a president that is not afraid to stand up, demand that people and councillors reach these meetings, and that we have constant monitoring and KPI checks to make sure that we are serving our students.
So on that note, how do you intend to enforce KPIs for an organisation of which many members are volunteers, and which is currently struggling to reach these kinds of goals?
Absolutely. I think most students would recognize you don't need to be paid in order to fulfill your responsibilities. I come from a background of working in clubs and societies. I've held executive positions on non-for-profits outside of university. These are positions where I'm not paid. These are positions where I meet so many inspiring leaders and individuals. They know what service means. They know about the responsibilities that are instilled into them. And there are important processes and protocols that go through, particularly with leadership, to make sure that they fulfill those responsibilities. We need a culture in the SRC that promotes that type of service. We need a president and a leadership of the SRC that understands what it means to not be part of this political backdrop and just do what's right for students.
Do you support the SRC going on strike in solidarity with the NTE on campus?
I think that's a really important question. And I think for a lot of students as well, it's really important because we need to make sure that students, the SRC needs to make sure that students know exactly what the strikes are about. Strikes are really important, I'd say. They're a vital part of negotiations. And
can I push you for a yes or no answer?
I'm not planning on going to my classes that day.
So you think that the SRC should go on strike?
I don't think it should bind any of its councillors or bind people to make certain decisions. And one thing I'd actually really want to emphasize is that I've said how important the strikes are, particularly for the teachers, because I think no one can doubt that teaching conditions have a tremendous impact on the learning conditions of students, right? Just from my own experiences, I've worked with lots of teachers at this university, professors. I even tutor as part of the Indigenous Assistance Program, and I'm a very good student. Those conditions are conducive to learning. But what we can't tolerate, as we've seen, unfortunately, in other protests or other cases of industrial action, are situations where if a student on campus decides on that Wednesday they really want to go to class, they pay their fees, that's what they want to do with their time, we can't have any forms of intimidation or harassment for those people going to class. So that's what I'd urge, that's what I really hope everyone that does respect that day of action keeps in mind.
So under you, the SRC as an institution would stay open just in case students wanted to come in. Is that accurate?
That's not what I was referring to. I just meant in terms of students that want to come to classes, I have a zero tolerance approach to any form of intimidation or harassment for those students that decide they want an education on that day.
Okay.
If you had to cut $50,000 from the SRC's budget, where would you cut it from?
I think one of the, premises of that question is that if we're cutting $50,000, then we're in a position, that is an unfortunate position for the SRC. Under my presidency, I hope we're not in a position where we have to cut $50,000. But assuming we are, assuming potentially SAF allocations don't go our way potentially, I think there's a few things I want to be specific about. And I think that's one of the things about my policies in terms of being specific that students deserve to know. We definitely can't cut from any of the vital services, frontline services like the legal service or the caseworkers for two reasons. The first reason is that we have enterprise bargaining agreements for the salaries there, which take a big chunk of it. It's just impossible for us to cut that. Secondly, and more importantly, those are vital services. Those are services that help students day to day. That's not part of what I would want to restructure. I think what we should be looking towards, if that's what we'd have to cut, is looking at things like how collectives spend their money, working together with all collectives and office bearers to make sure we have a fair allocation, but seeing that that is a discretionary fund, we can go there. I think we can look at some of the affiliation fees we pay, considering that our university pays a tremendous amount, $63,000 this budget on affiliation fees. It's really important we investigate why other universities are able to get lower costs or lower affiliation fees. I think we can look to many different aspects around the SRC's budget to restructure. And I'm not afraid to be specific about that. I think it's really important that we engage with that question.
Well, let's hope we can keep the specificity going. What would you do differently to your predecessor?
Isabella.
That's right.
I think Isabella, like I said before, is a fantastic person. I think the job of the presidency is a tough job. I think one thing I do differently, and I know I've mentioned it before, is just in terms of core rep meetings. Right? We have an SRC that this year has not served its students, and it's been quite an abysmal failure. For a lot of students on campus, they might not know much about what the SRC does. But what they do know is that the SRC is not showing up to their meetings. They're elected to these positions. Some of these positions are paid, and they're not coming, and they're not conducting the business of what student representatives should do. I think that needs to change, and we need a president that is not afraid to change in that way.
I don't want to speak for her, but I assume Isabella is not particularly happy with the state of in-court meetings, though. So what would you specifically do to make that happen? Because she posts, for instance, in the Facebook group, reminding people that meetings are on.
Attends them herself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think from day one, and like I said, I think the job of the president is a tough one. I think she's taken some measures to make sure she can promote that. I think just with the new SRC term, from day one, you'll see a president that is not afraid to sit down with every single person on that SRC and make it very clear what those responsibilities are. And if those responsibilities, those KPIs aren't being followed, just like any club and society on campus, just like any non-for-profit organization, we need to be able to have a situation where people know those responsibilities and are able to take action on that.
Okay. What would you do as a DSP of Oniswa if Oni criticised yourself or criticised a factional ally or criticised a member of the same political alignment as you?
Oniswa is able to criticise whoever they want. As long as it's not defamatory, as long as it won't bring the SRC into disrepute or legal action, I don't think that would be an issue. And I think that's really important because what students are sick of are people that might sense a question like that and think the first thing they think about is how they can further their political agenda or how they can keep people on side. That's not what the president should be thinking about. They should be thinking about an independent vision for students to have the best benefits. if it's in the interest of students, whatever policy comes before the SRC is what I'd support.
Do you think that you're more experienced than your opposition, and why or why not, I guess?
I'd say yes. I think in terms of experience, we're not talking about experience on the SRC, right? Obviously, as a councillor on the SRC, that's what some people might like to refer to as experience. I think my experience comes from so many different places, and more importantly, it comes from places that students really recognise. It comes from clubs and societies, it comes from working in not-for-profits, it comes from being in positions where I can meet the diverse range of students that are actually on campus and not just meet the needs of a niche few. And I think during this campaign, I've tried tremendously hard to make sure that we are a campaign that has consulted on every single policy that we have put forward, and that we are an SRC that is ready, experienced. We are a team that are ready and experienced to serve on the SRC.
The president is a full-time role. How much time would you expect to spend on it if you were elected?
As a full-time role, I think there are many situations where there will be hours on campus, for instance, in the office. There will be many instances where you're doing work at home. If I had a rough guess, I'd say probably 15 to 25 hours on a regular week. But obviously that's subject to change on busy weeks and less busy weeks. But I think the most important thing is that's your primary role. The SRC president isn't just a figurehead for any sort of group or any sort of faction that wants that position. The SRC president is someone that has a full-time responsibility to serve students. And I think I've had that experience before. I'm ready to take on that tremendous responsibility.
So people shouldn't expect to see you, for example, in this office, in the president's office, from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday?
I think, obviously, I have commitments across campus, and I think it's important as someone that understands and is relatable to students to still be a part of their societies, to still be going to their classes and being part of the university that they represent. I think having a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday might not be conducive to that, but outside of those commitments, having as much time as possible is the ideal situation.
So specific to your policies, you've said that the SRC only spends $360 on sexual harassment issues, essentially, or on the sexual harassment department. And it is correct. That is the correct figure for the sexual harassment department. However, that ignores the nearly $5,000 that the Women's Collective, which runs a significant portion of sexual harassment and assault campaigns, receives. So were you deliberately misleading students, or did you not know that WOCO was involved in those campaigns, or why did you quote the figure of $360?
So that figure, $360 on the SRC sexual harassment department, like you said, it's a correct figure. We're making those policies completely aware and cognizant that the Women's Collective had $4,400 on all their campaigns this year. And I think what's really important is that such a statement in our policies recognizes that we can do a lot more, right? We're not trying to say that there was only $360 committed to sexual harassment issues overall on campus, but we are saying $360 to that particular department represents an indication or a willingness to fund it that we think is still insufficient, right? If there is a collective on campus or on the SRC that wants to work together with another collective on a primary goal or primary campaign that is vital to their department, then obviously that's the autonomy of that collective to decide, and that's something that, as president, I'd be more than happy to accept. But I think what we can always do, and this has been discussed at length now on our page, is that this funding, this figure, is still a representation of something that we think could be a lot better. If we want to fund the Women's Collective in their campaign against sexual harassment further, that's something that could happen and still maintain a small amount on the actual department itself. But whatever it is, we think that there's a lot more to be done.
I mean, I would like to fund everything more. Why did you choose the department that has a far lower figure, and when there's a department that has also done far more and has a far larger amount of funding?
Because when it comes to the issue of sexual harassment on campus, right, everyone knows when it comes to the survey results being released, that has confirmed the fears of a lot of people, a lot of survivors, about just how much of a tremendous task it is to fight for a safer environment on campus against the university and to ensure we have the support networks at the SRC to make that happen. So $360 is a representation, and it's a symbol of something that is holding us back. We've had so many SRC campaigns where people have claimed, for instance, they really want to fight this, and they really want, for instance, to have a full-time sexual assault counselor or sexual assault-focused solicitor. We haven't had that happen. We haven't been able to deliver. But in order to make that, and it is, a high cost, make that happen, we have to take sexual harassment seriously as an SRC and be willing to make tough decisions to make that happen. And $360 is symptomatic of the type of thinking that won't get us there.
Turning to another of your policies, which is a means-tested textbook scheme, how would you plan to actually do that means testing? Would you require people to sign statutory declarations? Would you take into account their parents' wealth? Why not simply lobby the library to deliver those textbooks so that not just one student could use them, but many?
I think, so 2 parts to your question. The first, in terms of how that subsidy would work, we're very proud of our policy of making sure that we can have a subsidy for textbooks for students that really need the most. That would take into a multitude of factors, and I know that in implementing that sort of policy, there'd be a lot of consultation, a lot of precedent with other subsidy programs across the university and beyond that we take into account. But that'd be something that would involve documentation. It would involve recognizing, for instance, wealth of the individual, their circumstances, their background, extenuating circumstances that might have happened since entering university as well. But one important thing that I'd emphasize with that is when it comes to these policies, you'll have so many candidates that are willing to stress the importance of things that promote equality or equity across campus. What we're trying to do is deliver on those policies. That's why if the SRC doesn't actually fund that, I'm willing to take $5,000 out of my own salary to start that funding. We're ready to deliver that. And I think on the second aspect of your question, when it comes to a subsidy like that, that's something that's direct, that's something that really impacts the lives of students, and it's something we can do from day one. That doesn't mean we're limited in terms of our advocacy and representation with the university or with libraries. It means that we can, however, have a policy that works from day one and helps students with the cost of textbooks.
On the note of your promising to take money out of your salary for that, it's my understanding that, well, the president's salary is noted in the regulations as being equivalent to a full-time minimum wage. So to change that salary would require passing a change to that regulation, as far as I understand it. So how do you propose to successfully change that, considering some of the people who would be voting on that would, a lot of them are very unionized, a lot of them would not want to see the president get a pay cut, some of them might be hoping to be president in the future themselves.
Absolutely, and I think there's 2 really important things to that question. The first thing is I don't intend on making any regulatory changes to reduce the president's salary. I will get paid a salary. I will take money out of that salary, give it to the SRC to create that fund. That is my pledge. And I know, in the future, if we have a different president who isn't committed to the interests of students in the same way, they might want that salary for themselves. I think that type of thinking, that type of presidency is not what students want. It's a presidency that is interested in themselves, and unfortunately, it's a type of SRC that has acted for so long and for so many students meant that they're becoming disengaged. So I think that sort of scenario is quite deplorable and it is saddening, but that's why I'm ready to act on this.
One of the roles of the president is balancing comparative needs from students. You've spoken about the need to fund sexual assault services more, and you've also spoken about the textbook service. What made you decide that you wanted to give $5,000 to students who need textbooks rather than using that money to support campaigns around sexual assaults on campus or a potential sexual assault dedicated solicitor?
I think the premise of that question, if we take that to its extreme, means that the whole salary itself should just go back into the work of the collectives. And the work of the collectives is extremely important, but obviously we can't have a situation where we're saying all office bearers and their salaries are going towards or making regulatory changes to make them go towards that in that way. I think one of the key things is that when it comes to that textbook subsidy scheme, it means that we can finally have a service that hasn't been funded at all in the past, and it's something that I can kickstart by taking that money out of my salary. It's really important we keep fighting for a safer campus for all. It's really important we prevent sexual harassment and make sure we can have things that promote sexual assault reporting, and we can look into the feasibility of having a full-time sexual assault counsellor on campus. Those are things I'm going to be unwavering in my commitment to fight against. So both of those things are important to me, absolutely.
But money is fungible, so do you have an answer for prioritising one over the other?
I don't think it's a matter of prioritising. When it comes to allocating the budget, allocating $1.8 million, my priorities will definitely, in terms of the gravity of that, be focused on making a safer campus for all, making sure we can support and promote the welfare of all students on campus.
So in one of your other policies, you've said that you want the SRC to have therapy dog days on campus. I was wondering why you think the SRC should run these when the university already does, and why you think this is like a particularly important policy for improving students' mental health.
I think it's one aspect out of a multi-factor policy for promoting positive mental health on campus. We've had an SRC that, unfortunately, even when it comes to matters of simply promoting positive mental health course around campus, will fail to show up for a meeting, fail to pass that sort of initiative. Having an initiative like Therapause Dogs on campus, which has had success and the university does run that, and promoting it and expanding it through the SRC means that we can reach a lot more of campus. And I think that's something easy we can do. That's something that would really make a good benefit. There are many other factors that promote mental health on campus. It's important that we make sure we commit the resources and promote all the counselling options, all the services available on campus that the university does substantially fund through the SRC. And I think one other thing I'd note is one of the big problems about an SRC that isn't representative is that there is a huge portion of the university undergraduate population that don't get those vital services. People that really need mental health support, like for instance, international students on our campus who take up 50%, if not more, of the student population. They're not going to see these promotions by the SRC on Facebook, for instance. We need to make sure that we work on the efforts of international student office bearers before us, work on a WeChat, make sure we promote those sorts of courses and those sorts of support networks so that we can reach everyone.
You're a member of the Australian Liberal Party. That's a party that introduced voluntary student unionism, which the SRC lost a lot of money from. It's a party that has opposed the Student Services and Amenities Fee, which provides the entirety of the SRC's $1.8 million budget. As a member of a party that supports those policies and holds those values, why should students trust you to be the president of an organisation that is dependent on that funding?
I'll make one thing very, very clear. This election, this team, the Vision for SRC team, is a team that is independent because regardless of the personal politics of any individual, one thing that the SRC has lacked for so long, and one thing that we will bring to this SRC, is a commitment to be guided by the best interests of students. The best interests of students means that we will fight for them regardless of whatever government is of the day, whatever the policies will be. If it is the best interest of students, we will promote that through the SRC. And I think one thing you mentioned, why will people trust me? I think it's important to note in the context of this election what the choices are. I'm a presidential candidate that has made it very clear, very specific in our policies, we are acting independently for the interests of students. I have very fond opinions of both Bella Pipka and also Imogen Grant. But I think, unfortunately, Bella stands with a team that is the exact same as the Stupol establishment, the same SRC, that hasn't been delivering, that has been acting purely for the interests of a particular party of politics. We have Imogen Grant, who has stated in all her policies, in her videos online, the niche few that she is representing, the certain subsect of the population on campus that she will represent. Our policies, our team are committed to representing students in their best interests no matter what. So that's why our students can trust me.
So do you think that SAF is in students' best interests? Do you think that do you think that students paying the student services and amenities fee is in their best interests? Or, like, to tie it back to the question about the Liberal Party and voluntary student unionism?
Well, seeing as all students pay over $1,000 during their whole university life, the important thing for the SRC to do is make sure that money is going to things that really benefit them, that they are making the best use of that money and that they are accountable with that money. That's the important thing for the SRC to focus on.
So is that, sorry, a yes or a no on supporting SAF?
Supporting, SAF goes towards all these student organizations, including the SRC. I don't think a yes or no is sufficient. I think what we have to make sure is that we have SAF, we have students paying SAF, paying $150 every single semester. That needs to be used effectively. So an SRC needs to recognize that SAF is important to be used responsibly.
On a different Liberal Party policy, this one enacted a couple of years ago, or almost enacted, was the uncapping of fees for university study. Is that a policy that you support?
When it comes to, again, government policies, whatever government it is of the day, if the student interest is the thing that is under assault, that is what the SRC should be fighting against. Regardless of the individual that takes that position, the SRC needs to be at the forefront of things that fight against assaults on students.
So your CV lists work for the University of Sydney as a student ambassador, a role from which you can be fired for criticising the university publicly. How would you perform the advocacy role of the SRC while being contractually bound not to challenge the university?
The role of the student ambassador, to be very clear, the student ambassadors are people across campus who are hired by the university to promote the great aspects of the university for prospective students coming in. One of the great things about that role is, in fact, the majority of my time is spent talking about different degrees and actually making sure that we inform students in year 12 coming into this university about some of the key decisions being made, right? And that's what the SRC needs to do as well. When it comes to some of the key restructure decisions being made by the university, that's a skill set that I already have. That's a skill set that's really important for the SRC to continue to function. I don't see any big conflict there. I think being a student ambassador has given me some extraordinary skills in being able to advocate for students and reach out to a big proportion of people.
So when you signed up for that role, you would be a staff member of the University of Sydney formally, and that comes with abiding by the University of Sydney's public comment policy, which says that you have to uphold the outstanding reputation of the university. If you were, for example, saying that the university had done the wrong thing by students by enlarging class sizes or closing the SCA or saying that a merger of faculties was bad, all things that a SRC president could plausibly be expected to do, that would likely be in breach of that policy. If it came to that, would you resign the role of the presidency or would you resign your role as a student ambassador?
I'm very comfortable saying whatever I need to say that is in the best interest of students as the SRC president. The primary role that I'd be taking on, the position I am running for, is SRC president. That is a huge role. I will always act in the best interest of students.
So your policy statement also includes a policy that you would have an open meeting where the SRC discusses the budget. The budget is already passed at a public meeting of the SRC, so why do you think it's necessary to have a public meeting specifically?
We absolutely need a special session of the SRC Council to specifically and only talk about the budget that is proposed. At that council meeting this year where we had the budget proposed to us, this budget was co-drawn up by one of the general secretaries this year, who is also a presidential candidate, Bella Pitkar. And what ensued were questions that were absolutely shouted down during that meeting. Legitimate questions about $1.8 million of student money, where that money was going, why certain increases or decreases were made, and very legitimate concerns about that budget were absolutely shouted down, rushed through because there were other items on that agenda. I think what students deserve to know is what exactly the budget goes towards. There deserves to be transparent scrutiny of that, so we should have a special session of council where the only item on that agenda is the budget.
Fantastic. I think that about takes us to the end of this interview. Thanks for participating and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.